today's topic. We'll move on to today's topic. So today is a very interesting topic actually. We have all theory today. I think if time permits, we might see one activity. Otherwise, tomorrow we'll be seeing some new activities which will be of your interest. Okay, without further delay, let us start with today's slide. Golden Gate parameter file. Now you might say, come on, Arun, we have completed so much and why we are going back to parameter files. See, parameter files are actually the heartbeat of Golden Gate. No parameter file, no process will work. So there is a special importance for parameter files in Golden Gate, and there are few things that we need to discuss. Okay. One note that I want to say before proceeding further, it is impossible to cover all the parameters that are used in real time or all the parameters that generally people use. Okay, it's close to impossible to discuss all of them in a training. So what I have done is, like, going forward over the period of 2 weeks, I'll be sending you emails about some parameters which you should know and which are not covered in the training, because it's typically not possible to cover everything. So in the practicals, what we are doing is we are looking at the bare minimum structure in order to configure the replication. That is what we have done till now. All the labs that you see, you will see the bare minimum parameters you must use in order to configure or to complete your lab practice. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is, definitely going forward also, like in this slide, we will be learning some new parameters. But how do we learn the parameters which are used in real time? For that, I'll be sending the emails, which I definitely assume that everybody is going those emails. So read those emails for over the period of next 2 weeks. There are some new parameters which are used in real time and which will be used in interviews also. So don't neglect them. The interview preparation that I will be doing with you guys, even I'll ask you those questions. So don't neglect the emails. They are very important. Every email that I'm sending, that is from 2 points. One is it is related to real time. Second one is it is related to interviews. Okay, so you should know it. So let's get back to parameter files. So what are the parameter files? They are the heartbeat of Golden Gate processes. So where do they reside? dir prm directory. All process parameter files reside under this directory. So when a process is started, parameter file is read from this directories. There are two ways to edit the parameter files. We can use VI editor or we can use edit param in the GG prompt, right? So we can use these two ways. Every process has a parameter file. So what is the naming convention? It's the process name.prm. That's the parameter file naming convention. Very simple. We already know all this. Now guys, there are some important rules for the parameter files. Now these are what you call standards. You can call them as standards, or you can call them as default rules. So these rules are followed by your parameter file whenever you use them. So let us discuss about these rules, and you should know about these rules by heartedly. Okay, did you notice by default when we configured the replication, by default the insert, update, deletes are being captured? Okay, so insert, update, deletes, these all are automatically captured by replication. That means the default capture of Oracle Golden Gate is insert, update and delete. We are not talking about anything else right now. We are just talking about these three statements. Okay, so by default, when we configure one table, when we configure extract, pump, replicate, and in the replicate we have direct mapping, so by default Golden Gate is able to capture the inserts, updates and deletes which are executed onto the source side, correct? So this is the default capture. Now the question arises, is there a way to change this behavior? Yes, there is a way. In the upcoming slides you will understand that. Next is, every parameter has a default and non-default value. This is very important, and this is what we are going to practice going forward. Now see guys, insert is a default, update is default, delete is default. So does that mean, let's take our client is saying that I just want to capture all the inserts that happen onto the source, but I don't want to capture update and delete. correct? Might happen. Client requirements, client can say anything. So if client is saying something like this, they want only inserts, they don't want update and delete. That means there should be a non-default value for update and delete, right? Yes, there are values like this. So every value has two, okay, every parameter has a default value and a non-default value. I think in the next slide you will understand the non-default value for all these three. So like we have a few more parameters, like over here also I can show you. We'll be discussing about some more parameters where you can see this is the default value, this is the default value. In this parameter there is no default value, in this parameter this is the default value. Okay, so every parameter generally has two values. One is the default, one is non-default, except for some exceptions where there are 3-4 values also, but we won't talk about those parameters right now. So by default, every parameter will have a default value. Let's take insert is there, and also a non-default value, which means if I don't want to have insert, then there will be a parameter which you can use, which will not capture the inserts. Next rule. Parameter validity is until new value is encountered. Okay, let me give you an example. So we have this one, right? Now the client is saying that I just want to capture, okay, we'll consider 2-3 examples. Actually, we have this activity going forward, but still I'm talking it right now about it here. Now see, client says that for the fox.emp, I just want the inserts, but I don't want to capture the update and delete. So what we need to do is see the default is, what is the default? Default is insert, update and delete. Okay, so by default the insert, update, deletes will be captured, but for this table I just want to capture the insert, but I don't want to capture the update and delete. Okay, I think for this one, well, let's go to the next slide, then we'll come back. Okay, for the default DML capture, okay, we have these three parameters which are by default enabled because these are the default ones. Defaultly your extract will get the inserts, it will get the updates, and it will get the deletes. That means these three parameters are by default there in your parameter file. Okay, and then get deletes. On a normal note, this is how your parameter file looks like. When you don't define, because these are default parameters, that's why we don't write them. But in a way, this is how your parameter file looks like. Okay, now let us look at the non-default capture. Assume that, okay, if we don't want to capture the inserts, the non-default value is ignore inserts. If I don't want to capture the updates, the non-default value is ignore updates. If I don't want to capture the deletes, I can use this parameter ignore deletes. Okay, now we know the default parameter and also the non-default value for those parameters. Let us come back to our rules. This point is very important, guys. Parameter validity is until new value is encountered. So what is the meaning of this line? So what I'll do is over here and then ignore inserts, ignore updates, and ignore deletes. I'm just writing those parameters over there. Now the client is saying, or client is asking us, client has a special requirement. Client says for the EMP table, okay, EMP table, they want to capture the insert and no update, no delete. That's the requirement. For the EMP one, they don't want insert, okay, and they want update, they want delete. And for EMP2, they don't want no insert, no update, and they still want delete. Okay, this is the requirement of the client. Now how do you define it in your extract file? So what you need to do is, this is how you have to use the parameters. First of all, for the employee table, the first table, okay, for the first table we need insert. By default we know that in the parameter file all three are enabled. Okay, all three are enabled. So the client is saying we don't want update, we don't want delete. That means what we need to do is we need these two parameters. Ignore updates we need, because for the employee table we want to ignore the updates and we want to ignore the deletes. Now if you look at the parameter file till this line, okay, till this line, all the three parameters like get insert, get update, get delete are enabled. Okay, I'm going line by line, right? Now when you look at the next line, it says ignore updates, ignore deletes, but the get inserts is still valid, right? So that means for the employee table, okay guys, these parameters are valid for the following table. If I leave it over here, this setting will be followed for all the tables. Okay, so the table that follows these lines, this will be applicable on those tables. For the employee 1, I need to write my own captures over here. For employee 2, I would need to write the captures over there. Okay, so we'll continue that one. Now at this line, we have three settings. Our insert is there. I mean, we have the get inserts, we have ignore updates and ignore deletes. Okay, now let me come back to this point. Can you see parameter validity is until new value is encountered? Now in this file, there are no other values that I specify in the file. What will happen? This setting will be continued for all the three tables, but client has a different setting for EMP1. What is the setting? Client says that I don't want the inserts. Okay, so at this stage, just to simplify, so we have get insert and then ignore update, ignore delete. Okay, this is what is enabled right now at this line. For EMP1, it is saying we don't want the inserts. Okay, so that means get inserts is enabled, so I need to disable the inserts. So how do I disable? I will use this parameter ignore inserts, right? And next one is we want update. That means currently it is ignore update, right? So I need to get updates. I need to use this parameter, and I also need the delete. That means I need to use this parameter get deletes, right? So at EMP1, what is our parameter status? We have ignore insert, get update and get delete, right? Now for EMP2, what client is saying that they don't want the insert. So can you see ignore insert is already enabled at this line, so I don't have to specify it again. Okay, ignore insert is already there, but I have the get update. What client is saying, I don't want the update for EMP2. So what I need to do is I need to use this ignore updates, and then get delete is enabled, and client is saying I want delete. That means that will be applicable for EMP2. So at this stage, what is the status of parameters? We are ignore insert, and then we have ignore update, and then get delete. Okay, so a lot of you guys might be in confusion. Let us revise one by one. Every parameter has a default and non-default value. Just for the example purpose, we have seen some parameters where the default is get insert and the non-default value is ignore insert. Okay, and then we have parameter validities until the new value is encountered, or should not be the new, should be non-default value, right? If you see ignore updates is valid until it encounters get updates. Can you see? It's so simple. Ignore updates will be valid until it encounters get updates. Okay, now get updates will be valid in the parameter file until it encounters ignore updates again. So every parameter validity is until the non-default value is encountered. One such example is this one. Now we again have another activity that we'll be doing. Don't worry, this was actually the last slide. So we'll come back to this activity once again. But just for an example, I showed you something. Parameter validity will be only until there is a non-default value which is encountered. If the non-default value is encountered, that value will continue in the parameter file until again the default value or any other value is encountered. Now parameters are in effect for the tables that follow the parameters. This is pretty simple. Like in this case, we have, can you see, ignore updates, ignore deletes, and then get inserts. It is valid for fox.emp, right? And these three parameters are valid for the table following. And this one parameter, along with the other default parameters which are running in the parameter file, are valid for emp. So parameters are in effect for the tables that follow. Now assume that client is saying for all the employee 1, 2, 3, we have the same condition, emp and then emp1, emp2, they want this condition. Then what you can do is you can just specify these tables below this first one. So these parameters will be effective for the tables that are following. Simple as that. Okay, we'll come back to this one later. Help on the parameters only from 12c release 2. Okay guys, from 12c release 2 version, because we are using release 1, in the 12c release 2, Golden Gate has given some help on the parameters itself. Like info param, we cannot see this one because we are using 12c release 1. So info param and then parameter name, whatever the parameter name is. Like for example, in this case, if I want to get some help, so info param and then get inserts. So this will give me the details about this parameter. So but this will be valid only from R2. Now this slide we have already completed, but once again, the default DML, all the DML statements by default, Golden Gate will capture insert, update and deletes. And the opposite or the non-default values ignore inserts, ignore updates and ignore deletes. Now these parameters you can use either in extract, pump or replicate process anywhere in the parameter files. Okay, so now we have an activity. Okay, are we going to use different parameter files for each table? Not required. It depends on the client need. See, client want a specific type of transaction to be captured for a table, right? Now in this case, you don't need multiple parameter files, rather than you need you don't need multiple extract. You actually need proper parameter set in your one extract file. That should be enough. So guys, I have this activity.